As Julie mentioned, my name is Andrea Keating. My pronouns are she and her, and I am a career development practitioner. So I've been working in career development for about 12 years now, both post-secondary and I got my start in not-for-profit. And I'm also a Gallup certified strengths coach. And so essentially we'll be looking at some of the work I do as a Gallup certified strengths coach to talk to you about how you can use your strengths for career success, really at any stage of your career. So as a Gallup certified strengths coach, excuse me, what I do is I work with individuals at all stages of their career. And I work with teams as well to help them identify, understand, but more importantly, apply their strengths to the work they do for their customers, their clients, and the work they do for each other. And I have found that this is a particularly useful approach because when we learn to work from a place from strength and we apply our strengths to our everyday work tasks and goals, we have increased levels of energy, we have less stress, we're more engaged, our performance is a lot stronger, and teams tend to be more productive as well. So it's got a lot of benefits, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. If you do have any questions, perhaps what I'll do is I'll get you to type them in the chat. Actually, we don't have a really big group, so if you do have any questions and you're comfortable, feel free to just interrupt me. I have limited view of the people who are participating in the screen where I'm sharing my screen, so I won't be able to see you if you're waving at me, and sometimes the chat gets a little bit buried too. So certainly if something comes up for you, just shout out to me and
I
let
can
me
have a
know.
look at that too for you as well.
Oh, that would be
Uh,
great, Julie.
yeah,
Yeah. So, okay.
yeah,
So just, yeah, type it in the chat, let Julie know. And Julie, you can interrupt me and
sure.
we'll go from there. That's no big deal. All right. So we'll go ahead and we'll get started. So today, we're going to look at, oh, before I go on, I should also add that I typically, to facilitate this type of strengths-based development with teams and with individuals, I use two tools, a two-prong approach. One is the Clifton Strengths Assessment, and which is an online assessment tool that will give you a list of your top strengths, as well as workshops and individual coaching. Obviously, today I know none of you have completed the assessment, and that's okay. I'll talk to you a little bit about that, and if you want to know how to access that, I can certainly let you know that, but you won't need to have completed the assessment to get some good information out of the workshop today. So today we're going to cover what is strengths-based development and how it can help you maximize your success. We're going to talk about some ways to recognize your strengths in action. And we're going to talk about the 4 domains of strength as based on the Clifton Strengths Assessment and how you can use your strengths to meet your goals. So before we start, I'm going to give you the statement that you see here. Success can be reached by. I'm going to give you 3 options, and I want you to choose the best option to finish the sentence, okay? And they're numbered 1, 2, or 3, so you can type number 1, number 2, or number 3 into the chat. So success can be reached by 1, identifying weaknesses and working to fix or overcome them. 2, working hard and hoping for the best. Or 3, identifying what you are already doing well and further developing those traits. So take a moment and tell me which one you think is the best way to finish that sentence. Guy says 3. Okay, L says 1. Okay, I see some 1s and some 3s. Yeah. So for the purposes of what we're discussing today, the mostly right answer is going to be number 3. Identifying what you are already doing well and further developing those traits. And I say mostly right because the first 2 are not wrong necessarily. Identifying weaknesses and working to fix or overcome them can certainly be part of your success, certainly being aware of those weaknesses and how to manage them. And also working hard and hoping for the best is certainly a part of that formula. However, it lacks structure. So we're going to go with number 3, identifying what you are already doing well and further developing those traits. And I'll explain a little bit more what I mean by that. So what is strengths-based development? There's lots of definitions for strength. There's lots of ways to approach strengths-based development. But for the purposes of what we're discussing today, we're going to define it as an approach that helps individuals identify how they can intentionally aim their unique strengths so they are better equipped to accomplish personal and professional goals, performance objectives, and respond to everyday situations. And you'll notice I have intentionally aim highlighted there. And that's really again, one of the main points I really want you to walk away from the session with, right? It's one thing to have awareness, and that's a really wonderful thing, and it's a really applicable thing to have that awareness. But what we want to learn about is how we can actually use those, right? So we can accomplish our goals, so we can meet our performance objectives, and even respond to those everyday mundane things that we do every day. So why is this important? Why strengths? Why should we care? Gallup is a polling and research company in the US, and they own the Clifton Strengths Assessment. And they have done really an extraordinary amount of research on the impact of strengths on employee engagement. And what they have found is that people who are able to work from a place of strength every day produce significantly more at a higher quality. They adapt more quickly to variance. They have more positive than negative interactions with those that they work with. They build stronger, more engaging relationships with their customers or with their clients. And they have more positive, creative, and innovative moments. And it's research that's been ongoing for over 10 years now, and they have surveyed people from all different career fields. So people who work in customer service, in education, in the corporate and nonprofit worlds, this is what they have found through their research. Something else that's interesting that they found is that beyond the world of work, there's also compelling reasons to be aware of and use one's strengths. They have found that people who apply their strengths in their personal relationships or in their community work outside of their professional roles really can operate with more confidence, direction, and hope. So there's quite a case for operating from a place of strength. Also really interesting with the research, and I'm curious to see if you are surprised by this number, is that they, out of all the people they asked, only, and I think this the sample goes into the millions, right? Because they're worldwide and it's quite a long reach. They asked people if they have the opportunity to work from strength every day, if they have the opportunity to do what they do best every day, and only 1 out of every person they surveyed was able to answer yes to that question. So I'm curious if that stat surprises you, and what's been your experience with that? Have you had jobs in the past or roles in the past? I mean, you could think, if you're students, think of your role as a student. Do you feel you have the opportunity to do what you do best every day? Don't be shy. There's only a few of us here.
I would say very few people have the opportunity to intentionally apply their strengths.
Yeah, so that doesn't surprise you, hey?
No, and especially in the younger and beginning stages of one's career, when there's people are, other people who have more seniority to you, until you reach that stage yourself, I think it can be quite difficult, I would say.
Okay. Yep. Certainly the research is telling us that only 1 out of every 4 can say that. What's also really interesting is that people reported that having those opportunities to do what they do best every day is more important to their professional development than a prestigious title or a higher salary. That's also coming back as well. Does that surprise you?
No, it probably doesn't surprise me, but it's interesting to hear it for sure. I think Kenwell made a really good point. For me, for example, I'm at a certain point in my career where, yeah, a lot of my time can be spent working from my strengths. I'm fortunate at this
That's
stage.
great.
But I think some of it some of this working from strengths, or the lack of working from strengths for me comes from a lot of interest. So maybe I want to be a great gardener, and maybe I want to be a great tile setter, and I want to be good at all of these things. But really, I would be starting all of those things from a place of weakness.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I think sometimes maybe we put ourselves into that situation, or we have false expectations, or I don't know.
Well, there's a lot of correlation between what we're good at and what we're interested in. So starting something new is not necessarily starting from a place of weakness. It's just you haven't developed the skill. Right? So we want to be mindful of that. We all have to start from somewhere when we're starting something new. And we'll talk a little bit about, your evidence of strengths in action and how you can kind of know when you're working from that place of strength. But certainly, and that connects to that community piece, right? Where we operate with more confidence, direction, and hope. And our hobbies and our interests outside of our job can also be an opportunity to work from a place of strength. So yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Those are great points, though. Thank you both for sharing. A couple other stats to throw at you. So people who focus on using their strengths are actually 3 times more likely to report having an excellent quality of life. They're 6 times more likely to be engaged in their jobs. They have 7.8% greater productivity. So a few more things just to keep in mind as we kind of look at the benefits to applying this to our work. Oh, and teams as well who receive strengths feedback have 8.9% rather greater profitability. So we're not getting into the teams, the strengths approach as it applies to teams so much. We're talking more as the individual, but there's a lot of interesting stuff there about partnerships within teams who take this approach and the work that they do. So let's talk a little bit more about success. Okay, and we want to talk a little bit about what makes people truly successful. Okay, so we all have different definitions of success and what that means. And I'm going to show you a very famous person, and we all know who this is, right? So this is Oprah Winfrey. So whether you're a fan of Oprah or not, it doesn't matter. We can't deny the worldwide and the longevity of her success, right? So when we think about someone like Oprah, right? She's an entrepreneur. She's communications. She's a journalist. She's had the talk show. She's transitioned into Apple TV with a whole series. She was on Forbes. I think she's the 20th most powerful person on the Forbes list for 2020. And she's incredibly successful across a bunch of genres as well and different mediums. So some of the traits, let's talk a little bit about some of Oprah's traits, and I'll start that. So she's highly influential, right? We can't deny that. When Oprah says something, people listen. When Oprah shares, some kind of item that she likes, people buy it, right? She's highly influential. She's inspirational, right? When Oprah speaks, people are often uplifted. She has quite an impact that way. She's an excellent communicator, right? She's had training as a journalist for sure, but she's really able to highly relatable, right? Like people can really relate to her when she's speaking. People almost feel like she's speaking for you, thinking about the things that you're thinking about, even though she's incredibly famous and wealthy and authentic, right? Oprah, as part of her brand, it promotes authenticity and being truthful, right? So those are some parts of her brand. So I want you to take a moment, and if you're comfortable sharing, I would encourage you to share someone that you admire, or think about someone that you admire. And this person can be famous, or this person can be someone that's in your circle that you know, and share with us what are some of the traits that make that person successful. So someone successful you admire, some of their traits, if they're famous or not, and certainly if you'd be comfortable to share that with the group. And I'll give you a moment to think about that.
I can share something, Andrea.
Please, Guy,
Um,
go ahead.
yeah, so a childhood friend of mine who's
Mm-hmm.
become um, very successful
Mm-hmm.
and popular, successful in his career, let's just say
Yep.
for sure.
Yep.
Um, he's got some pieces, so he's his personality. He's really got a personality for things. So I think that's maybe excellent communication is
Yep.
part of that for him. Authentic. I will also say, in his case, he's got a lot. He's very energetic. He does put a lot of work in as well. He's
Yep.
had some luck, but he's had to
He's driven.
put in a lot of energy
Yep.
and drive,
Yep.
and probably sacrifice some of those things too.
Yeah. So sounds like, yeah, very driven, hardworking would be a couple of his traits as well. Anybody else want to share? Thanks for sharing that, Guy. Who do you admire? Who is successful that you admire?
Don't forget, you can type in the chat too if you don't want to speak in the mic.
Yes. Can be famous. And if you don't even, if it is, if it's a person who's famous or not famous, you don't want to share who it is, why don't you type some of the traits in the chat?
Can I add something else, Andrea? Sorry.
Of course you can, Guy. Yes, please.
I've read a number of Malcolm Gladwell books, and he has some differing opinions, of course, about what makes people successful. But
Yep.
I know one of the pieces he talks about is, I believe it's 10,000 hours. So if you spend 10,000 hours at something, you get good at it, and maybe be successful at it. An example he gave was the Beatles, for example, and others. So maybe that's something that helps make people successful, is time spent in that area.
Yep. Yes, of course. It's not enough just to be good at something. You have to invest in it, right? So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And so, okay, great. She's hardworking, passionate about what she does, and she teaches what she loves. Excellent traits, right? Passion, hard work, as someone who's able to teach. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. I didn't catch the name of the person that kind of popped up in my screen. Here we go. Used to be okay, thank you for that. Yeah, exactly. So when we think about someone like Oprah, right, who's very famous, who we all know, and we think about the person, that Guy, his friend who's quite successful, and we think about Nusabia's person that she is thinking about, what they have done is taken their traits and sharpened them into points of excellence, right? They were able to identify some of those things that they do really well, the drive, the hard work, perhaps it's competition, and they have really focused on those, and that has likely helped them reach that level of success, right? So again, back to Oprah, just as an example, right? That ability to be authentic, to communicate, to influence. She's quite good at that, and she applies that across every single medium that she's in, whether it's like WW or her Apple TV series or her, interviews with different thought leaders or celebrities. We see those things again and again. Likely, Guy, with your friend, right? Those particular traits, we see those traits, how he's really invested in those. And even if we want to look at it from Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours approach, those are things that he has used to drive that, right? So that's what I really want you to start to get thinking about today. Whether you want to reach Oprah level success or not, when you are able to identify what it is you do well and really invest in those things, it can really drive your level of success quite high. And the thing with the strengths-based approach, and this is going to be a little bit controversial when I say it, so I'm going to ask you to hear me out. With strengths, it means, with a strengths-based approach, it means giving up being well-rounded. Okay. And so what that means is that we can't be good at everything, and that's okay, but we can be really good at some things, right? And so it's really about identifying those things that we're really good at, sharpening those and bringing those to our work. And if we think about that in terms of a team, whether we're working, we'll all work with people some of the time, no matter what we do. Everyone brings their sharpest points of excellence to the team, and that makes for the well-rounded team. Okay. Does that make sense to everyone? Does anyone have any questions or comments about that while I grab a drink? Okay.
Andrea?
Yes, Guy, go ahead.
What I mentioned earlier is that's probably what I struggle with. I want to be a great gardener. I want to be a great tile setter, but they're not my strengths, and I want to be well-rounded. But that's what intrigues me about your presentation today, is because maybe I need to see it. I need to be open to seeing it differently.
A little bit differently. And so I'm going to give you a definition of what I mean by strengths as we go forward. But what I want you to think about is when we talk about gardening or tiling, for example, just use those as examples. Those are skills. Those are things you can learn to do, right? And it can take some time. Your strengths can help you reach that goal. So the strengths will inform how you learn, right? How you best learn. So say, for example, I'm going to get a little bit ahead of myself. I don't want to go too far, but say, for example, one of your strengths is something called achiever, right? So people who have that particular strength is based on, I'm basing this on the assessment. So I don't want to give you too much context and confuse you. But people who have this as one of their top strengths tend to be incredibly hardworking. They really get a lot of satisfaction about being incredibly busy and productive. They like to make a lot of lists. They always like to have things to do. So if you had that particular skill and we were thinking about how you could apply that to your interest in gardening, I would say, how can you use this particular strength of yours to help you learn that skill? Does that make sense to you, Guy? Maybe a little, maybe not. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, I know.
Yeah, no, yeah, that helps.
Okay, all right. That's great comments. Keep them coming though. I appreciate it. Thank you. So what we want to talk about, so the key to success is to fully understand how to apply your greatest strengths and talents in your everyday life. Work, school, gardening, hobbies, right? Those things. We really want to understand that and apply it. That part that I started with the beginning, right? The recognition is very, very important and it's the base, but the application takes a little bit of practice. And that's also an integral part of this particular approach. Okay. So I want to talk for a moment about strengths versus weakness. Okay. So strengths-based approach asks, what will happen when we think about what is right with people rather than fixating on what is wrong with them? So this is how this particular approach really is quite different from kind of traditional ways of professional development. So the conventional approach to personal and professional development goes something like this. It states, we already know what you're good at, so let's put that over here and manage it. Let's look at the things that you're not doing so well and see how we can fix those and really focus on that. Strengths turns that on its head and says, what if we looked at those things you're really, really good at, invested more in those, to sharpen those into those points of excellence we talked about, and manage weakness. Now, that does not mean we ignore weaknesses or that we pretend that we don't have them, right? We have to manage them. But what it does mean is that our best opportunity for personal development and enhancement are seldom discovered or developed from weakness fixing. So it can certainly be a part of the formula, but you're not going to reach the same level if you're all of success if you're constantly focusing on fixing your weakness. I'll give you an example of my work life and how that shows up for me. So my strengths, my top 5 strengths tend to be very heavily rooted in people and relationship building. And that bodes quite well for me because I work with people all the time, right? As a career development professional, I also work at the university as an academic advisor. So I work with adult learners and professionals all the time, and I love it. It motivates me, it energizes me, and I've taken time to invest in that through learning and training and doing work like this. One thing that I don't excel in is, well, Excel, data tracking, details. And Microsoft Excel is something that I have to use quite frequently to record some of my data from the work that I do. This is something that doesn't come naturally to me. I don't enjoy it. But that doesn't mean at the end of the day I can ignore that work and I can go to the dean of my faculty and say, you know what, it's my weakness. I'm not going to do that. You don't need to see that report, right? I wouldn't have a job. But what it does mean is that I have to manage it. I still have to get it done. So when I know I have those parts of my job upcoming, I set aside more time to do them. As simple as that, right? I need to carve out that extra time because it takes me longer. I will watch tutorials on YouTube. I will try to get some literature on it so I can learn how to manage it a bit better, to learn about it because I still have to do the work. And I will also lean into my relationship building strengths to partner with other people, my colleagues, who might be who are actually, I'm thinking of one in particular I partner with quite frequently, who does excel with that kind of detail, that kind of documenting, right? So those are some ways I manage that while still continuing to invest in the things that I do really well, okay? So when people learn how to consciously apply their strengths to goals and tasks, their ability to perform with excellence, it increases substantially. I'll never be performing with excellence when I have to document details and use Microsoft Excel. Never in a million years, and that's okay. But what I can excel in is my work as a coach, as an advisor, who works with students and professionals to help them reach their goals. Okay, so let's talk for a moment about strengths, the definition of strengths. So, obviously there's a million definitions of what strength is, but I am basing mine on the work from the Clifton Strengths Assessment through Gallup. So for our purposes today, we are going to define strengths as natural patterns of thought, feeling, and behavior that can be productively applied, right? So they're things that we do every time. We often don't think about them. They come very naturally, the reactions and ways of doing that we just do. Likely no one taught us these, right? So that's something really important to remember. Natural patterns of thinking, feeling, or reacting, and behavior. And I got ahead of myself. They're often subconscious ways of approaching tasks and reaching goals. We may not be aware of them. And another thing to keep in mind is that they don't develop on their own. We need to really pause and be intentional about identifying them and to use them, right, to maximize performance. And as a coach, I can help you understand how you can use them. And so when we work from a place of strength, it really directly impacts our productivity and our engagement, right? So Guy, to go back to what you were saying, absolutely right, that the 10,000 hours of investing something can certainly help you get to a place where you are mastering a task, right? But the difference with strengths is that it impacts how engaged you are. And there's correlations between engagement and well-being and productivity. So we want to keep that in mind as well, right? If you're going to invest in something for 10,000 hours, you'll be a lot more energized, productive, and engaged if you are doing that from a place of strength in something that you're genuinely interested or drawn to, if that makes sense. So I asked Julie to email the attendees before the session to make sure you brought a piece of paper, just one, and a pen or a pencil. So I'm wondering if you all have that, and if so, can you grab it and get it ready? We're going to do a little exercise that looks at the impact of strength on productivity and engagement. I'm going to give you a moment to get that ready.
While they're doing that, Andrea, I'm just going to, just in case folks have to leave early, I'm just going to put the feedback survey in the chat.
Sure. Yep.
And you don't need to fill this out right away. Please don't. But I want to put it there just in case others need to leave early. You can just open it or bookmark it and do it after. It's fine. And I will put it in there again at the end. Thanks.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to give you a phrase and we're going to have a little friendly competition. Okay, so I want you to print the following phrase 3 times on my say. I don't want you to do it yet, okay? Now, before I give you the phrase, the first thing I actually want you to do is draw a line down the middle of your paper to just make it just a half it. So when you've halved it, get your pen or pencil in your hands and get ready. Don't go yet until I say, but I want you to write the phrase or print, it doesn't matter. I use my strengths every day. Okay? Okay, are you ready? Switch hands. So I want you to write or print, I use my strengths every day with your non-dominant hand. Ready? Go. When you're done, just give me a little wave in the chat. You can use one of the icons to let me know you're done, or you can just say done. Okay, I see Guy's done. That's great. Ella's done. That was tough. Done. Okay, quicksand is done. You might hear my dog behind me. She's just hopping up in a chair. Some people still writing. Let me know when you're done. Mohammed is done. Excellent. Okay, I see Juliet is done.
So this is a very useful exercise because it shows, you know, an analogy you could say, because you really with your non-dominant hand, I mean, your weakness is, you know, it becomes, it's so obvious to see, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
I can see somewhat where you're going with this.
You can. Okay, good, good. We're not done the exercise yet, so I definitely want to talk about it. I'm glad you can see where I'm going. I'm going to ask you what you think the purpose of the exercise is. So if you're all done, what I want you to do is take your dominant hand and then on the other side of that piece of paper, print or write that phrase 3 times and let me know when you're done. Be sure to let me know when you're done. Okay, Mohammed is done. Great. Chen is done. Great. Elle's done. Excellent. Now you're done. Okay. Yeah, an explanation point after that one. Okay, Juliet says done. Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, okay. So let's talk about this exercise for a moment. Tell me what round 1 felt like with the non-dominant hand.
It was a fun challenge.
Okay. How did it feel? What were you thinking as you wrote it? Was it easy? You can type it in the chat if you don't want to unmic. Mohammed says, not only takes more time. Oh, hold on, I'm going to open that up again. It always takes more time. The outcome is not as best as the dominant hand. You bet. Yeah. Well, Juliet says it was a breeze, a no-brainer, easy, squeezy. Your non-dominant hand was a breeze, Juliet? Let's talk about the dominant hand then. On the other side, the second time we wrote it 3 times. How was that? What were you thinking as you wrote that? Was it easier than the seamless? Yep. Simple. Guy says simple. Yeah. So what do you think the point of this exercise was? Someone was sharing that earlier. I didn't see, I couldn't tell who was speaking, but if that person wanted to pick up where they were going with that comment earlier, what do you think the point of the exercise was? Or anyone at all can jump in.
I think the purpose is to compare the strengths and weakness.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. So this is what it feels like to work from a place of strength versus a place of weakness. Juliet says, my non-dominant hand was easy to mess things up. I did not have to be perfect, so it was easy to be imperfect. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, so this is what it would feel like to work with your greatest strengths versus your lesser, right? So the non-dominant hand was slower. it felt, I'm just going to look up some of the comments, took more time, the outcome was not as best. Juliet felt a little bit less stressed because she didn't have to be perfect. And compared to the right hand, right? Seamless, simple, it was very fast. Did anyone's writing improve with the non-dominant hand? Sometimes that happens. Yeah, so definitely. Yeah. So it'll improve incrementally, right? So, but unlike, so this is what it feels like to work, imagine the impact it has on productivity and engagement if you're in a role where you're always, metaphorically using the non-dominant hand, right? It's frustrating, it's slower, you're not as productive compared to if you're working, again, metaphorically using that right hand. You don't have to think about it. It's seamless, it's easy, it's fast. And this is what it's like to work from a place of strength versus a place of weakness. Those things that come natural to you. I'm going to minimize this chat here. Okay. So let's shift a little bit and talk about how do you know when you're working from strengths. I'm going to give you 5 clues, and you can take a moment to reflect on that, and feel free to share if you want, but you don't have to. So the first clue, this goes back, Guy, to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, are to what kind of activities are you naturally drawn? So thinking back to what activities energize you, right? So a really great place to start when you're trying to identify your strengths is to really think about past experiences. And when we start to think about them with a little bit of structure, you can really find some great evidence of your strengths at work. And so when we're talking about what activities energize you, we want to compare that to what activities are frustrating or drain you, right? So typically if you're working with something and you're frustrated or you're drained from it, like when I work with Excel and I have to work with, a computer screen, doing that detail work from a long time, I can do it, but it drains me, right? Whereas, opportunities to coach and work with people really energizes me. Another thing to think about is what kind of activities do you seem to pick up quickly, compared to what kind of activities take you a bit longer to master even when you know all the steps. So that can be evidence of rapid learning, right? Are there some things that you do that you need very little direction? You just kind of intuitively know how to do that, right? Maybe it's for someone who might be a really great teacher or instructor, right? Being able to pick up how to articulate information in a streamlined way that's easy to understand, right? That can be an example of that. Is that an activity you seem to pick up quickly? In what activities do you seem to automatically know the steps to be taken? It's very similar to the ones you seem to pick up quickly, but there can be certain things that we do that no one taught us, that again, we didn't really need any direction on, but we just kind of automatically know them. So if you can think of examples when you've known the steps to automatically be taken to certain things, that can be evidence of flow, when you're in flow. And during what activities have you had subconscious moments of excellence when you thought, how did I do that? Has that ever happened to you? Can you think back at anything you've done in your work or your school or in your personal life when you thought, I don't know how I did it, but I did it, and it feels really good? And so what activities give you a kick, either while doing them or immediately after finishing them, and you think, when can I do that again? That can also be evidence of strength, something you find high amounts of satisfaction in, right? It's like, wow, that was really, really great. I really would love to do that again. So as I go through these, can you think of any times when you've had experience with one or all of these? And you don't have to share what those experiences were, but I'm curious, if reflecting back on some of the tasks that you do, can you think about anything? Oops. Guy, I'm going to call on you because you've been really great about sharing. I'll pick on Guy. Can you think of anything? You don't have to share what it is, but I'm just curious if you've ever had any of those
Yeah,
experiences.
I can think of something maybe. I just
Yeah.
don't want to monopolize.
No
Years
worries.
ago, a summer job of mine was to tree plant in BC.
Yeah.
So not typically how we think of planting trees in Newfoundland, digging a hole and putting trees nicely. It's actually like high speed production of planting little seedlings. And I did very well at it. I excelled at it. I'd never done it before. Um, but I guess now reflecting on things you just said,
Mm-hmm.
now I can think of maybe some of the strengths that kind of helped me. So, like coordination and athletic ability, um, maybe a desire, a competitive nature a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the trees had to be planted with good quality also, or you wouldn't get
Yeah.
paid for them. So quality, I guess I can see some of those traits and strengths now. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, right? So that's something to really keep in mind as you're going forward, and even when you're thinking about those things, the gardening and the tiling that you brought up, right? If you can connect how the that you had with that really good experience in BC, what were the traits or the strengths that you used there, and kind of how can that infuse you with these new skills you want to learn, right? That could be a way to approach that. That makes sense. So interesting. Thank you for sharing. I know I called you out. I'm sorry. Does anybody else want to share, just to be fair to Guy?
Uh, I can share one of
Yes,
my
please. Who's speaking? I
experience.
can't tell.
Yeah. So last semester, I wanted to challenge myself and
Yes.
push myself to study more. So I registered 4 courses from MUN, and then I'm also interested in real estate. So
Okay.
I registered another 5 courses from another school, and then
Oh
I
my gosh, you
thought,
did 9 courses in one semester.
yeah, yeah,
Wow.
I thought,
Okay.
I can finish it, but at the end, I complete all of the courses.
Amazing.
Yeah, and with high score. So yeah, sometimes I feel maybe I can do better than I
Mhm.
expected. Yeah.
And did that experience, did it energize you?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
of course.
So being very busy and hardworking may be one
Yeah.
of your strengths, right? And we'll talk a little bit, I'll give you a little bit more context for the 34 strengths from the assessment. But yeah, those are both great examples, right? Of looking at those traits that helped infuse you get to that level of success. It helped you succeed, right? That helped you. Very interesting. Thank you both for sharing. So, as I mentioned earlier, typically I base the type of coaching and workshops I do on the Clifton Strengths Assessment. And so, again, there's all kinds of definitions and themes of strengths, but for our focus today, we're going to look at that. And so the research that Gallup has conducted, based on the assessment, has shown that there's 4 dominant areas that the strengths will fall under. So they are executing, influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking. So people who have executing themes, they tend to be at their best when they're very busy and productive, right? That's something to keep in mind. So they're really rooted in success. So I really want to make sure that I drive that point home. It's how you're wired, but how you're productively wired, right? How you use your strengths to get things done. So for someone, who likes to be very busy and productive, doing those 9 courses was a way for you to invest in those strengths to be successful, right? That helped you along. People who have a lot of influencing themes, they tend to, well, know how to speak up, to take charge, to make sure the team is heard. They can really take other people's ideas as well and build on those, right? And they also tend to be very aware of an external audience. So they can, sometimes they're in leadership positions, sometimes they're not. They'll take different forms. But that awareness of an external audience is kind of a key theme with the strengths under that particular domain. Relationship building, that's the one that I have quite a few dominant themes in. And as the title implies, right, they have the ability to build strong relationships, and they're at their best. They tend to problem solve by taking into consideration the human factor of the problem, always, naturally, without really thinking. That's a key component to how they would solve problems and reach goals, right? How does the human part fit into this? People with dominant strategic thinking themes tend to be at their best when they're in their head. So typically, if you have strategic thinking dominant themes, then you are very good with conceptual ideas, thinking. Often they'll come up with a bunch of different solutions to problems, right? So they're really good with information, and those ideas can be a big part of that. And so, so that I've got the dominant 4 themes up against, and these are the 34 strengths that fall under each of the theme. Again, we haven't done the assessment, so that's okay, but just to give you a bit of an idea of the types of strengths, right? And this, again, it's based on the research from the assessment. They found that based on the answers that were given, there was 34 themes that tended to come up the most. So a couple things I want to point out. If you go ahead and do the assessment and you have mostly, say, strategic thinking themes, that does in no way mean that you can't build relationships. If you have dominant relationship building themes, that doesn't mean you can't think strategically, right? It's just how we lead and how the things that motivate us and energize us, right? Like I have dominant relationship building themes, but I have a full-time job. I have 2 kids. I have a consulting business. I can still get things done, right? But I tend to approach those things through how I can solve problems for people. So don't fall into that trap. That's a trap that we will naturally go to. And so I just wanted to show you an example before we clue up again, because you don't have a lot of context, but just how we can put strengths into action. Okay, so I've called 2 strengths descriptions that will come if you have done the assessment, and I've shown you what themes they go into. So one of those might be intellection. So to highlight a couple of key points with that, into people who have high intellection means they like to think, they like mental activity. This need for mental activity may be focused. For example, you may be trying to solve a problem or develop an idea or understand a number of person's feelings. The theme of intellection does not dictate what you're thinking about. It simply describes that you like to think. You're introspective. In a sense, you are your own best companion as you pose yourself questions and try out answers on yourself to see how they sound. So some of you, this may resonate with some of you very well. I pulled this particular theme because I'm coaching someone currently who has this in their top 5 of their Clifton strengths. And one of the things we talked about with this person was the importance of for them to do their work, because this person's in a leadership position, and they need to, because they lead with this theme, to schedule and set aside time to think and absorb and process information. So when a project is coming up or if they have to make some decisions, that's a very important part of their success. The other piece of that we talked about with this person was how, because one of the drawbacks of that, they said they felt they spent a lot of time in their head thinking, right? So it was hard to kind of show that they were producing work when they had to think about it so much. But with an intellection, they are producing, right? They have to process it. That's the way that they are productive. So we came up with some strategies for them to capture their thoughts. So when that time came from their superiors to say, hey, what have you got for us? They've got something tangible to show them. So we talked about voice memos, right? In order to be able to capture their thoughts without the interruption of writing them down, right? So it's a way that we were able to identify this really works for this person. And this is how you can take it a step further to give you that time to be successful, right? Because she needed that time to think, but also to be able to produce something for the people they had to report to. Restorative is another. This is under the executing theme. So people who are high in restorative, this is one of my top 5. So out of my top 5 themes, restorative is the only executing domain. And it's really about problem solving, right? I get very energized by it, which again serves me well as a coach because I work with, again, students and also people who are, out working to help them solve problems. And so one of the things that I like to do is develop workshops. And so when COVID hit, it really helped me to lean into my restorative because I was able to develop content that helped people with that problem that they had as the pandemic disrupted their modes of working, right? Which has happened to all of us, students and professionals alike, right? We had to go online. I don't have to tell you, right? But that was something that really helped me to come up with new content, right, to help. And it was about solving that problem that I was hearing from my colleagues, that I was hearing from my students, that I was hearing from my friends and family, the disruption that the pandemic had put on them put on their modes of working. So that's really it for me. It's just, I wanted to give you an overview of the philosophy and get you to start reflecting on some of the times you may have seen your strengths in action. The 34 strengths are up here, and I'll just open it up. If anyone has any questions or comments, I'm happy to answer them or listen.
Hi, Andrea.
Hi.
Hi, this is Al speaking. I have a
Hi.
question, but so it's more to like it's more about the day-to-day pursuit in figuring out your strengths
Sure.
and or mastering them.
Yep.
How would you distinguish between per se focusing or working on what you're good at as opposed to maybe neglecting what are essential skills?
Well, there's a lot of correlation between them. Well, let me back up. What do you mean by essential skills?
So, for example, like if per se I like just to quote on Guy, I like to garden, like like to
Yeah.
work on my garden, and just day to day as perfecting that craft, for the lack of a better word, perfecting that craft. How would I distinguish in, let's say, obstacles that I face and confronting them because they help my strength, or
Mm,
maybe almost like neglecting them because it's part of my weakness. I don't know if you get my question.
kind of. So, I mean, it's all about your goals, right? So if we think back to that definition, it's about applying those strengths to your everyday goals and everyday tasks. So it's it's about what you prioritize as important and how you want to get it done. And then the awareness piece of those things that energize you, those things that motivate you, which are your strengths, and how you can leverage those to help you reach those goals, right? You'll know when you're working from a place of weakness, right?
Mm,
And it's not about ignoring weaknesses, it's about managing them, right? So we know how to
mm,
manage them. So the
okay.
first step would be to really, that awareness piece is very, very important, but oftentimes we'll get stuck at the awareness. It's like, okay, I know this, but great, but the application piece is where we can take it a little bit further. So for your question, I think is really just that very first step is to work on, okay, what is it I'm good at and what is it that I'm not so good at, and how
Mhm.
can I manage those things I'm not good at, but really invest in those things that I am, so I can be more engaged, so I can meet those goals, so I can reach that level of success that I want to reach. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, totally. Perfect. Thank
Okay,
you so much. Yeah.
my pleasure. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I have one question.
Sure.
So I know my strength is about dealing with data, but
Yes.
so I worked as a cost estimator in a construction company.
Yep.
But so I need to deal with data every day.
Yeah.
And sometimes I found exhausting. Yeah,
Yes.
even though it's my strength, but sometimes I may not like it. So what's your suggestion on that?
Well, I'd say it's a skill you've developed. So oftentimes, oh, there's a lot in that question. Well-being is important. So,
Yeah,
and particularly, in this past year. So we always, even if we're working from a place of strength, kind of that self-care and taking those breaks that you need, or whatever, being physically active or having time with family or that time to yourself, whatever the case may be, is also an important part of that. So just because we're working from a place of strength doesn't mean we have to work at it 24/7 all the time, right? Of course, you're going to be tired. If I
yeah,
love coaching, I love working with people, it does energize me, but there's days when I do it really from, for 8 or 9 hours. And at the end of the day, I'm tired. Doesn't mean I don't
yeah,
love it. Doesn't mean it's not a place of strength, but I need to recharge, right? So we're much more than 5 strengths on a page, right? There's lots of other complications of being human that we have to take into consideration. So certainly do what you need to. And if for you, would you pronounce your name for me? I don't want to, Quinn. How do you say your name?
Xixing. I know it's hard to pronounce.
No, it's okay, Chishi. So
Yes,
for you, you had indicated like you like to be very busy, very productive, right? So if that's
yeah,
one of your strengths, you have to be very mindful about when are you getting to that point where you're going to be very tired,
yeah.
so you always have to kind of
Yeah.
set that boundary as well.
Okay, good.
Does that
Thank
answer
you.
your question?
Yes.
Does working with data energize you?
Sometimes, yes.
Sometimes. So
Yeah,
watch for your feelings around it when you're doing the work. If you feel energized by it, if you feel motivated by it, that can be evidence that you're working from a place of strength. But if consistently you find it's very draining, and it takes the energy away from you, that can be evidence that it may not be a strength, that it's more of a skill. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think for me, maybe 70% of the time, I really enjoy it. But
Okay.
the rest 30%, because sometimes I need to work under the pressure. So
Yeah, sure.
yeah,
Yep. So there's all kinds of things that are going to impact that as well, right?
yeah.
So our 5 strengths can be very helpful guides, but we have to be cognizant of other factors with that, particularly in this last year and a half.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Guy. I just saw your comment. Data entry drains me too. Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you all for coming. Certainly feel free to follow up with me. If you are a current Memorial student and you want to complete the Clifton Strengths Assessment, I would encourage you to get in touch with the Career Development Center and see if they can give you access to it. I don't know if they can or not. Certainly, I will facilitate workshops as part of some career workshops on strengths. And the ones that I have done will include the assessment. So if you do want to attend one of those, you certainly can. But some of the information and the pencil exercise will be repeated, but you'll get the assessment that way. If you're not a MUN student and you want to do the assessment, just reach out to me and I can give you the information on how you can purchase it. And if you want coaching as a, just email me and I can talk to you about that as well. Not for MUN staff, Guy. Nope. If you're interested in purchasing it, you can go to Google Gallup Access and you can go there and purchase it. If you want to email me, I can direct you to the website.
All right. Thank you, Andrea. This was great.
No, you're welcome.
And lots of great comments and questions. Very interactive. So if anyone out doesn't have anyone else has any questions, you can speak now. I'll stop the recording now, actually.